Joaquin Niemann, in my opinion, has one of the best swings in golf when it comes down to limiting the use of his hands and arms. However, in order to do this, he has to manipulate his body positions. It is a sacrifice that allows him to hit it long and straight, but for how long? Join me as I diagnose his golf swing and we get to see how this man accomplishes this rare feat. If you enjoy this or get education out of this video, even if you enjoy my one-man editing skills, please support us by liking, commenting, sharing, or even subscribing as we donate profits from this channel and our academy to the Hillerhood Foundation in South Africa to introduce golf to low-income children. But enough of that scallywagging. Get ready to analyze the golf swing of the great Joaquin Niemann. Good morning, Nine Golf Academy members and guests, and welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to take a look at Joaquin Niemann. I know there's been a lot of criticism about this man's swing in terms of how long it's going to last, and I'm in agreement. I don't think this swing will last as long as others, but there are many things he does correctly, and what we can learn from this swing is how to minimize your hands and arms and how to increase your body. Now, when you increase your body, you can obviously create more power, and that's how he gets to hit the golf ball over 300 yards most of the time. But we're going to start out with the driver swing. I'm going to do a quick one on the driver swing, but then we're going to go straight to his wedges because I think that's a really good eye-opening motion that he does with the wedges, because not only does he have to tilt but stay down and strike the golf ball. But what we can gather already is his spine angle tilt back and his hand position looks pretty good. Golf ball is slightly behind his hand position, so that golf ball is kind of veering off to his right shoulder in terms of his tilting axis. And if we draw a straight line from the golf ball up to his tilting axis, you can see it's hanging over that right side. And again, that's by design. He wants to strike this golf ball with the right shoulder, and in order to do that, he has to really rotate his hips, clear him out the way, and get the arms to go very high and pull across and exit left with a lot of tilt. Not for the faint of heart. I would not recommend doing this. You will end up in an emergency room. And if you look at that left wrist, we can see that logo. Anytime we see the logo, that means that is a very strong grip, and he has to now put his body into position to hold off that release with a strong grip. So let's take this swing on the way back. We're going to look at some motions, and we see not a lot of reaching, not a lot of extending. It's just a simple turn. We don't see those arms getting out. As we go to the top of the swing, we can see a lot of rotations. So we see that shoulder turn and the hip turn. A lot of separation. Remember, we take that left shoulder connected to the left hip, the right shoulder to the right hip, and you can see how this is torquing or twisting around each other. Now, the whole goal is to get that to increase. Now, obviously, it depends on your rotation, depends on your flexibility, and we can see that transfer of energy. So now we get that left hip to try and move over slightly left, and we see the right shoulder immediately dipping down. Now, what we can learn from these positions here is why he has to do that. A, because of that strong grip. He has to get his arms out in front to delay that release, and the only way to delay the release is to create sufficient amount of room so his lower body's getting out the way, it's pushing back, allowing for this excessive tilt. Now, this tilt is usually what we see with most long drive hitters prior to impact, but he is still holding his wrist hinge way back here, and this is one thing that he does that I haven't seen very many people do. Because that strong grip, he has to delay that angle, and right at impact we can see he still has some angle on that left wrist, but also his left elbow has to break away, and that is because he has dipped so much down. And we look at where his head was, which is that box at the top, and take a look at where his head is now. We see so much dippage and going down. That is because of that lower body driving its way out the way, providing the room for that shoulder tilt. Now, if we take a look at the tilting, he hasn't even hit the golf ball yet, and he's increased his tilt from that red line to this lower green line. Once he strikes the golf ball, his tilting hasn't stopped. So we still see almost 90 degrees of tilt at impact. As he comes through, it is still increasing. Comes through, it is still increasing. Comes through, it is just about to the max there. So when people are concerned about this man's motion, I can see their concern, but in this day and age, you don't need to be on tour for 20 to 30 years to make generational wealth. That's a quick analysis on the driver, but let's take a look at the iron, because I think that's the most eye-opening one out there. Alright, so here we have Joaquin with a wedge on both front and down the line. We still have that strong grip, probably not as strong as the driver, but it's still pretty strong. We see that spine angle going right through the hands and slightly ahead of the golf ball, which again brings that golf ball back to that right shoulder, and this is kind of what he wants. Now, for those at home, I really don't suggest playing a golf ball back of center. That just promotes hands, because when you do that, I see a lot of compensatory motions. We see the body moving back or the hands overactive or not enough turns. So for now at home, just make sure your grip and ball position are well well taken care of, and you can find that out by working with a golf professional near you. Let's go to the midway point where that club is parallel to the ground. Again, we don't see a lot of wide turning going on here in terms of getting those hands away from the body. All he's basically doing is turning. His hands and chest are still in alignment with each other, and you'll find this to be a common trait amongst anybody who you see on television. On the right side of the screen, we might see a slight dipping down, and you'll notice at the start of his swing, you'll see how close his hands are to his body. His arms are actually pulling inside slightly, and that will cause him to get his left shoulder to tilt down to make sure that he keeps those hands on that plane line. And as you get to the top here, you can see his hands do get to that secondary plane line very nicely. He does a good job of keeping his tilting. However, it has increased slightly because of that maintaining the hands on the lower plane line. Left side of the screen, let's go to the top of that motion, and what we can see here, this is a position I really wish amateurs would focus on, because all this is doing is keeping your hands out in front of your chest. There's less time, there's less manipulation that can occur, because once those hands break back to here, now you have to make up this area within 0.2 to 0.3 seconds, which is very hard to do. And usually we get our hands back to that position by not turning. We get our hands and arms too active. So I highly suggest at home, wherever your body stops turning, stop your hands with your body turn. Now if we draw the shoulder turn versus the hand position, you can see they're still out in front of the body. We still have a limited hip turn with a pretty wide shoulder turn. I'm going to try and explain something in terms of his swing. So I'm going to draw a very basic circle. Now this might not be exact science, but hopefully this will help you understand what we're talking about here. Is where the tilt started. So you take a look at that line is where the tilt started. We draw a straight line from the golf ball through 90 degrees of that tilt. Now that is going to be his center point of his circle. Now again, I know this isn't perfect, but this is the idea here. So you can see how the more tilt you have, it pushes the center of his circle out towards his left heel. So if he's in this position here, his center of the circle will be in that region. If his tilting is this way, his center of the circle will be that region. So the tilting plays a huge part in relationship to where your ball position is. So now, having said that, hopefully you are keeping up with me. We can look at the center of that circle. So we now know that his circle is there. Halfway back, you can see how his hands have stopped shy of halfway back of his circle. That means there is less motion to strike down to the golf ball. The further right you place that golf ball, so if I put my golf ball back there, it all depends on your tilt. So if I maintain my tilt with my golf ball further on my right foot, I now have less time to get to that halfway point. So what does that engage? My hands and arms. So for those that have a golf ball in the back of their feet, this is where we run into problems, because you have to make sure it's maintaining its relationship with your tilting. Now, why is this all important for him? Because what he does with his tilting. Now, keep in mind he had a strong grip, so he has to delay the release. The only way to delay the release is to increase your tilt, get your hands further out in front of you. Right side of the screen, let's take a look as we go on down. Right side of the screen, we can draw a line straight from the butt of the club down, and we can see it's not in the center of his feet, it's more towards the toes. Now keep in mind this is a wedge, it's a shorter club, you're going to have more tilt, so this is adequate in my opinion. When we see that path, let's take a look at the first move down. Because his hands are so well connected to his body, he doesn't have to reroute his hands. So his hands and arms are basically going to go down to the golf ball directly, which is something that I would prefer to see specifically in the shorter clubs. But if you notice, his hands and arms are going down directly, but where's his club? His club falls right into that plane immediately. So immediately we can see that club is matching that plane. Now something really cool happens. Is the next frame, is it still matching that plane? The next frame, is it still matching that plane? Then the next frame, the club goes through the hands and down into the golf ball. And only then does it slightly raise higher. That's partly due to shaft droop, but because what's happening with his shoulders, if you look at the right side, we're going to see that same motion. So we see the relationship, we see this angle. We're going to draw this angle here in red. We see how that angle will stay. It's still in red. And we go a couple more frames. The angle's still there. He's losing it slightly, but even at impact, we still see a lot of angle. As we strike the golf ball, what do we notice what's occurring is look at how much the head has dropped down. And the only reason to drop down is to keep the hands ahead. And look at that big gap we have between our left arm and the body. Only reason we need to keep our hands ahead is because of that extremely strong grip. Only way to get this done is we see a lot of knee breakage and pushing your body back to this area on the right side of the screen here, which will allow you to stay in your spine angle. So he hasn't increased his spine angle at all. All he's done is provide enough room to increase his tilting. So we see this huge tilt on the right side. I know we got a lot of lines here. I'm going to draw another big line right there. We see that huge tilt on the right side. So that does not match his initial tilt. Now I know that we increase that tilt slightly, but to increase your tilt this much while going down, that is a ball that has been struck with the majority of the body, and the hands and arms are just kind of holding on and rolling over and releasing naturally. So he's trying to delay it. Even well past the impact, once the club's out in parallel, you can see how the hands are still directly connected with that chest. Something this is very hard to do. An incredible amount of tilt here. Comes on up, still maintains the tilt, and relieves, he's doing his best job to relieve some of that pressure on the lower back. But on the right side of the screen, we can see that exit path. Look how low that exit path is. But guess what? That's why I left all those lines there. Look at how solid that is. So he's able to keep with all that manipulation. The club only veers off back here because now he's rotating, standing up. But once he finishes, he's back somewhere in his spine angle. But this is why he's on the tour, because he's able to contour his body, keep that relationship with the strong grip, learn how to strike the golf ball. So somebody like this, if you were to change his grip, you'd destroy his golf swing. If you were to change his tilting, you'd destroy his golf swing, unless you change the tilting and the grip, or the grip and something else. So make sure we can learn from this move. If you don't pay attention to grip, who knows, he might have learned his grip the first time and gripped it really strong and developed the swing. It could be the start of a Marvel super villain. So hopefully you learned something from this. If you have, hit that like and subscribe. I really appreciate the support. And don't forget, we're coming back tomorrow with episode 2 of our experiment analysis journey. Other than that, I appreciate the support. Thank you very much. Fairways and green.